As talks ramp up for the next Concord agreement that will dictate the rules from 2026 onwards, Zak Brown is making a wholehearted plea to strip teams of their rule-making powers and sever strategic alliances that he believes compromise sporting fairness. His primary target? The relationship between reigning world champions Red Bull Racing and their sister team AlphaTauri. Today, we're looking into one of the more polarizing debates in the Formula One paddock, the future governance structure and team alliances within the sport. At the center of this heated discussion is McLaren CEO Zak Brown, who has been repeatedly outspoken in calling for major changes to prevent what he sees as an embarrassment to Formula One's integrity. Before we get into this story, we'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to the channel, and as always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Before we unpack the Red Bull Alliance controversy, we need to examine the broader issue that Zak Brown thinks needs addressing: the team voting rights within Formula One's governance structure. Currently, all 10 constructor teams have voting power on the F1 Commission that proposes and approves regulation changes before they are given the go-ahead by the governing FIA. Brown argues this system gives too much control to the teams themselves, who he claims are inherently driven by self-preservation rather than prioritizing the greater good of the sport long-term. He wants to give more of the power back to Formula One and the FIA to do what they think is right from an impartial perspective. His reasoning stems from examples like the heated debates over penalty point rules in recent years. In 2021, McLaren driver Lando Norris was racking up penalty points, with some rival teams opposing leniency on resets, only to then argue for relaxed rules when their own drivers got themselves into similar situations. For example, Pierre Gasly in the 2022 season faced potential race bans after he also racked up multiple penalty points. According to Brown, these contradictory team stances depended solely on what's good for me in that specific scenario, rather than having a consistent philosophy in the best interests of maintaining disciplinary integrity. He recounts an embarrassing team principals meeting where one rival team boss didn't even recall how he had voted on the Norris issue 12 months earlier. It's clear Brown wants to remove this conflict of interest entirely from the governance process. His view is, you've just got to stand back and let the FIA and F1 regulate for the fairness of the sport, which means you are going to win some and lose some, rather than having teams able to rally together and block changes. Under Brown's vision, teams would lose their voting powers but still be consulted as stakeholders, allowing the FIA and commercial rights holders to independently implement rules and uphold disciplinary integrity without being impeded by individual agendas. He believes no entity conflicted in some way should have a binding say. Brown argues this independence is especially crucial with the $135 million cost cap, now separating the competitive playing field. Any rule changes or governance structure that allows some teams to collectively protect their self-interests over cost parity undermines the entire premise of the budget cap. However, Brown's biggest grievance seems to be with the deepening strategic ties between world champions Red Bull and their junior team AlphaTauri. He argues their technical integration and facility co-location creates an unfair A-B team dynamic that directly contradicts the cost cap's aims. With spending now capped to try and level the playing field, Brown believes any subsidiary relationship where one team can take direct technical advantage of the other's intellectual property and resources defeats the core purpose. To him, it's an inherent conflict of interest. He cites mounting concerns about AlphaTauri's planned rebranding and increasing integration into Red Bull's UK base, including a relocation of some of their operations. This would only intensify the team's knowledge sharing and open up avenues for circumventing the cost cap's resource restrictions in Brown's view. Red Bull's 2026 engine plans add another layer, with both teams set to run the same Red Bull Ford power units from that season onwards. How can you have a controlling entity so intertwined with the performance of two teams under a cost cap? Unsurprisingly, Red Bull has aggressively defended their partnership with AlphaTauri and strongly rejected Brown's assertions that it will create an unfair advantage. Christian Horner insists both outfits will continue operating as true constructors on the grid, free to race without restraint despite integrated operations. Horner argues any ties or technical partnerships are being conducted completely within the letter of the regulations and under full transparency with Formula One and the FIA. He dismisses any suggestion their planned evolution will undermine the cost cap's objectives. Red Bull point to other competitors like Haas's wide-ranging technical deal with Ferrari, including having an office at their Maranello base, as examples of partnerships well within the rules. They see no difference in their approach with AlphaTauri. But Brown remains unconvinced by these parallels. While Haas has no direct stake in Ferrari's competitive interests, He sees the entire Red Bull AlphaTauri model as fundamentally compromised by conflicts of interest between two teams under a single parent entity's control. To the McLaren CEO, you simply cannot have one overarching corporate entity so tightly integrated in the performance potentials and engineering decisions of two constructor outfits in a cost-capped environment, regardless of claims of autonomy on the track. On one side of the fence, you have Zak Brown advocating for a total restructuring of the governance model. He wants to strip the individual teams of rule-making powers that allow self-interest and strategic alliances to derail impartial regulations and disciplinary integrity in the name of fairness. Instead, Brown is calling for truly independent governance from commercial rights holders like Formula 1 and the governing FIA, without the inherent conflicts of interest he sees in the current team-voted process. His view is F1's rules and penalties should come from an uncompromised place, allowing you are going to win some and lose some, rather than protectionism. On the other side of the debate, competitors like reigning world champions Red Bull argue their team partnerships and tight-knit operations with AlphaTauri are fully compliant under the current technical regulations. They reject any notion it fundamentally undermines the cost cap's objectives when followed transparently. As the negotiations toward the 2026 Concord Agreement continue, it's shaping up as a bitter battle that could dramatically reshape the competitive landscape and philosophy of Formula 1 governance. Will the sport take Brown's advice and enact sweeping changes to prevent the embarrassment of self-interest and strategic alliances circumventing regulations? Or will Formula 1 retain its current structure and team voting powers that have already divided paddock opinions so harshly? The resolution will dictate if the championship maintains perceived loopholes in the cost cap's spirit and disciplinary process, or undertakes philosophical reforms in how it defines fairness on and off track. It's sure to be an interesting negotiation period. Thanks for watching today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. See you in the next one.